This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Alex Albon just secured a P7 at the 2023 Canadian Grand Prix in a Williams. A superb defensive drive, and not for the first time, as his 5th point scoring finish since joining Williams in 22. Then post-race, Christian Horner, totally unprompted, had this to say.
Wow, I mean, Alex as well, congrats to him. That was, well, I ended up watching as much of his race as our race was.
This got me thinking, probably in part because I'm a massive Alex Albon fan, but also because, you know, Checo's having a rough time at the minute. The two AlphaTauri drivers, Yuki's doing well, De Vries not so much. Is there a possibility that now Red Bull, looking back, regret allowing Albon to leave the sphere of influence fully? Let's talk about it. Look, I want to make one opinion very, very clear straight out the door. I am in no way questioning Red Bull's decision to replace Alex Albon with Sergio Perez at the end of the 2020 season. It was a no-brainer. When Checo became available after getting dropped by Racing Point in favour of Sebastian Vettel, they had to take him. He just had arguably his strongest season of his entire career, and Albon was nowhere. I know, because I felt it, because I was there. I remember that season well, unfortunately. I didn't like it as a fan, of course, but part of me was also quite grateful to see that season end. Now, did Sergio massively improve the performances of that second Red Bull? I would argue no. Both him and Alex were consistently 4 to 5 tenths off of Max. In qualifying, Sergio improved that gap ever so slightly, but not by much. And then you look at their average finishing positions, excluding retirements. Max to Alex in 2020, it was P2.42 versus P7.75, which is not good. Then Max to Checo in 2021, or P1.84 for Max, P6.6 for Checo. So marginally better proportionally, but still not good. Given the 21 Red Bull in the hands of Max was more competitive relative to the top of the field than it was in 2020, I would actually also argue that Alex had a more difficult job. Alex's big gap to Max would put him right in the midfield scrap, and he'd struggle to move through the field so many times in 2020, whereas Checo, because that car was better, he could be half a second off of Max and still be clear of the midfield, so wouldn't have to fight and make up as many places as Alex did. That's my opinion on it. But that doesn't for a second mean I don't think it was the right choice to switch them. There's nuance here, right? I think it was Checo's experience in those big moments, whether it was capitalising on Max's misfortune in Baku to win, whether it was incredible defensive displays in Turkey and, of course, Abu Dhabi. Those moments paid dividends and allowed Max the opportunity to win that championship. We will never know how well Alex would have done if he'd stayed in that car in 2021. If I had to put money on it, I would say Checo, the job he did would have been better than what Alex might have done. The question of regret for me doesn't really surround that period. That was the right decision for there. It's more losing Alex entirely, because during that 2021 season, Alex was still part of the team. He was on the simulator like 24/7 helping out from Milton Keynes. And when you reflect on how well he's doing at the moment in 2023 at 27 years old with 3.5 years F1 racing experience under his helmet, do Red Bull, do Christian Horner look at Alex now and think, oh man, maybe we let him get away too soon? Look, when Kvyat and Gasly didn't make it work at the top team, they got the opportunity to drop down to the junior team, Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, whatever, to rebrand, to rebuild their stock after taking a pummeling. Well, to be fair, Kvyat didn't take a pummeling at all from Ricciardo. He was actually quite hard done by Max coming through when he did. But regardless, they got the opportunity that Alex didn't, right? He had to take a year on the sidelines and then return to F1 through an entirely different team. Although I say that Alex has severed his ties with Red Bull, that's not technically true. Maybe with Red Bull Racing, but not with Red Bull. And actually, if you look at their websites, his profile page is still on redbullracing.com and redbull.com. Now, either they're not telling us something, or more likely, they just haven't bothered to update the websites, which wouldn't be a problem if they used today's video sponsor, Squarespace, because it's an absolute breeze to update your site. Zero coding knowledge needed, 24/7 customer support, beautiful templates, drag and drop functionality. Yes, Red Bull, and it does include deleting old profile pictures of drivers you've dumped. I've been using Squarespace for years. It's completely free to try. Only when you want to put your finished website live to the word, do you have to pay anything? And when that time inevitably comes around, head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 to get 10% off of your first website or domain. And make sure you keep your website up to date, unlike Red Bull. I think it's fair to say the general consensus is Alex's stock is pretty high at the moment because he's doing a very, very good job. P7 in Canada, when you put aside the madness that was 2021, Hungary where Latifi got good points, and Belgium, of course, Russell qualified P2 and then the race that wasn't the race happened. That was Williams' best finish to a race since Felipe Massa finished P7 at the 2017 Brazilian Grand Prix, and even that race had like 4 DNFs. I do think he's like the perfect driver for Williams right now. Okay, George set a high standard and Alex has come in and carried on that journey for sure. Yes, it's hard to measure. You know, they had Latifi as a teammate who obviously not at the level, and Logan is still very green at the moment. But it's looking promising, and the big difference is that George was always looking for Mercedes. That was the stepping stone for him, wasn't it? Even the lie detector he did last week on Sky Sports. When questioned by Lazenby,
do you think he had one season too long at Williams?
George said,
I think 2 seasons.
You know what's actually crazy, right? George was doing a great job in the Williams, no doubt. However, they were looking for a replacement. Kevin Magnussen revealed all ahead of the 2021 season. Obviously, he got dropped by Haas at the end of 2020. Williams approached him, not to replace Latifi, to replace George. I was in contact with Williams. I had to find a lot of sponsors for Williams or throw a proper check at them. Williams saw me as a possible replacement for George Russell. The answer came right behind me. What kind of team is that, I think? Dropping Russell and keeping Nicholas Latifi was ridiculous. Pure idiocy. If Williams wanted anything, it should have been out with the Canadian. Woo! I mean, he's not wrong, is he? Alternatively, I think that surely Alex has a totally different mindset and approach to looking at that team, and I feel like the stars are aligning and this is a really good match for all parties right now. It'll be an uphill battle to get to the top, of course, for Williams, but at the end of the day, this is the team that gave Alex the lifeline to get back into F1 that Red Bull wouldn't, which is especially tough when you've just come off the back of a season getting slapped up by your teammate and then a year on the sidelines. I mean, Mick Schumacher didn't even get that badly beaten by Magnussen, and he's going to struggle to find a way back. Same goes for Daniel Ricciardo. I do think that Alex probably feels a sense of loyalty and that he owes Williams that at least to kind of see it through and see if they can deliver on this potential, because particularly now with James Vowles in charge, and he's a great speaker, which doesn't necessarily translate to results, but he does fill me with confidence, does Vowlesy. Spain exposed that car is really, really poor in medium high-speed corners. However, in Canada, with the upgrades on Alex's car, he was able to deliver. They've got that good straight line speed. They play to their strengths. They have to in their positions, consolidate and hopefully hit the ground running in 2024. I mean, they're 9th right now in the Constructors, and it's just about to reset the ATR, so they're still going to have 110% ATR time for the remainder of this year, and they had 115 for the start. So the excuses start to dry up, I'm not going to lie. If Williams aren't somewhat competitive towards the kind of midfielder to minimum next year, I know Vowles is going to take time to insert facilities and all that, right? But Aston Martin made the jump up before they'd even moved to their new gaff. Aston Martin's gains have exposed everyone, I think, Williams included. But now I want to look back to the end of 2021, middle to end of 2021. Red Bull made a choice, okay? They obviously had Max in the Red Bull, that's fine. Checo alongside him, cool. Happy with them keeping it. Perez did the job he needed to do. There was no way Alex was going to replace Checo after 2021. That would have been ridiculous, right? But 2 seats, Scuderia AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda. Alex Albon makes that 3, yet they picked the prior 2. In hindsight, are there regrets looking back? I think there's a compelling argument maybe for and against all 3 drivers, right? I mean, starting with Pierre Gasly, he spent 2021 wiping the floor with Yuki Tsunoda. It was the most lopsided qualifying points head-to-head of the entire championship. 15-1 in favour of Pierre, qualifying head-to-head. 0.559 average qualifying delta. 5.5 tenths, that's huge. 110 points to just 32 for Yuki, it wasn't even close. Yet even with that, really good job that Pierre had done. He'd done a good job the year prior as well in 2020. It didn't feel like he was genuinely being considered at any point. There were no rumours, there were no real suggestions, no substantiated suggestions that Pierre was gonna, potentially turn things around and then maybe get back into that Red Bull seat and oust Checo. He'd recovered his stock, however, it does feel like those bridges that Pierre appeared to have burned in 2019 lingered. Pierre is a driver who wears his heart on his sleeve. We know he's got a bit of a temper on him, and unfortunately, in that environment, it didn't paint a good picture and he got ousted mid-season. So then that makes me wonder what the rationale for keeping Pierre in that AlphaTauri instead of giving Alex that seat. But then, of course, you couldn't oust Pierre after 2021, where he'd just so dominantly beaten Yuki Tsunoda. Wouldn't have made any sense on the face of it, I guess. However, if you're looking Red Bull long term, if their ambition is, okay, we're going to get a driver in the top seat alongside Max. Did they already know by then? All right, Pierre blew up in 2019. It's not going to be him. Let's chuck him in the AlphaTauri, see how he does. Maybe we can get a fee for him in the future, which they did in the end. Alpine came along at the end of 2022, signed him up. £9 million is what I have read, that was the figure that was transferred. Not crazy amount of money to Red Bull, though. That's the only thing. Like, it's a big chunk of money, but it's not going to change them. They're Red Bull, for crying out loud. To be honest, I actually consider, and I said this in my F1 ratings video, right? I consider Alex and Pierre as equals. I don't think any differently between them in terms of performance right now. So then we come to Yuki Tsunoda. Again, 2021, he was slapped up by Pierre, right? And they chose him over Alex. They chose to give Yuki more time to develop, which I think he has now paid them back, right? Yuki's been fantastic this year so far, I think, anyway. I like Yuki, okay? I'm probably subconsciously biased towards him, but I do think he's done a really good job how consistently he's got to points compared to a driver of the experience, and people understandably thought Nick de Vries might come in and beat him. He's not even come close to that. However, you have to put that to one side. At the end of 2021, he had really struggled, and it was a gamble to keep Yuki on instead of Alex, and a gamble that Red Bull have made many a time, and sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. Hopefully it will work for Yuki. It seems to be working so far anyway. Now, Yuki is a Honda athlete. We know this, but that relationship is coming to an end. We also know this. Once Honda changed their mind and decided, oh, we're actually going to come back, Red Bull were like, no, which, I mean, fair enough. They put all this money into their new Red Bull powertrains facility, money they wouldn't have had to spend if Honda had just not left in the first place. So understandably, they were like, you know what? No, we're all right. We're just going to get a naming deal with Ford. We can still own it and do it all ourselves. And you can bugger off to Aston Martin. Which, I mean, who would have saw that coming? But again, this is all knowledge we have now. At the time that Yuki and Pierre were confirmed at AlphaTauri, that was the 7th of September 2021. At that time, Honda had already long announced their departure and hadn't yet announced their return. At that moment, we were all just, oh, well, Honda are gone for good again. I mean, we should have known they'd come back because, of course, they always come back. But at the time, it was dead. Red Bull were actually in discussions with VW Group at the time, Porsche to be specific, about a deal. Obviously that never went ahead because Porsche wanted to buy a part of the team and Red Bull weren't prepared to sell, hence why when Ford were like, we'll give you money, just slap our logo on the side and you do it all yourselves, they were like, sweet. The reason I'm clarifying all this is because I think that the reason that they kept Yuki wasn't to do with the Honda links, because as far as they were concerned, Honda were leaving anyway. They did see the potential in Yuki and were prepared to, long it out at the expense of losing Alex to Williams, essentially. Because if Yuki had been dropped, then Alex would have made so much sense for him to be the driver to inherit that seat. Yet now we're in a position where Honda are back, they're going to Aston Martin, maybe they'll try and get Yuki to Aston Martin at some point, maybe when Fernando retires, that could be a nice matchup if Yuki does go on to deliver the quality of performance that I think he can. You know what I think the ideal would have been? If Red Bull would have got an offer in for Pierre Gasly during the 2021 season when he was doing bits destroying Yuki, then they could have sold him. Maybe if Alpine had come in then. Obviously they had Fernando at the time and Fernando was pretty happy at Alpine then. Obviously that all went wrong. But if they'd have got a deal for Pierre across the line, that would have made sense. Sell Pierre then, get some money for him. We're like, no, there's no chance Pierre coming back because he's burnt those bridges. Bye-bye. Get Alex into that AlphaTauri seat and then crack on with Albon Tsunoda as a pair. And I think that would have been the most ideal, because then Red Bull wouldn't have had to lose Albon. They clearly wanted him to do well. Red Bull gave him a season and a half, and you saw how well it was received when he finally got those podiums, man. It was so sweet. That's the win-win-win situation in this, which didn't happen, of course. So Alex left to Williams. Pause, double check you've liked the video, and comment Alex Albon in the comments below to show me you've got this far in the video. Now carry on. So let's reflect on how things stand today, right? We're 8 races plus a sprint into the 2023 season, and for me, I think Alex has had the strongest season between him and Checo. For what that's worth, it's very, 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 very difficult to compare, of course, because they are in polar different situations, right? Checo's in the fastest car alongside Max Verstappen. Minimum expectation is very, very high. He needs to be, in that car, he needs to be podium every race, doesn't he? That is the minimum expectation given the package and given the performance that Max is able to extract from that package, right? Alex, on the other hand, again, that P7 in Canada is like a race win for Williams. Just getting anywhere near the points and getting in the points is fantastic, and he's done that multiple times already this season. But he's also meant to be the team leader. He's got a young rookie alongside, so he's got a bit of pressure to make sure he beats Logan every single time, which he's doing so far. It feels like Alex is growing into that role that Williams have put him into, and it feels like Checo is... I hope this is just a rut. I've got a lot of love for Checo Perez. I would so love to see him win like a world champion. Like when we were gassing him up at the start of the season, did I believe it? Probably not fully, but like, I just wanted it to happen so much, man. Because you imagine Sergio Perez winning a world championship, the Latin American support would just be absolute immaculate vibes. His dad would just be a crying mess, and I would love to see it. Either way, it does seem to be qualifying that is the issue, which was the issue for Albon, was the issue for Gasly, right? In a race, you can manage pace and fine, but if you're starting back, if you're starting, 3, 4, 5, 6 tenths behind Max Verstappen, you're going to be in that midfield fight. You're going to struggle to gain positions. And, start of this season, Checo was doing great, a couple of wins at the start of the year, boom, happy days. As soon as qualifying starts to struggle, he can't make that same progress in the races, just like Alex couldn't make. I'm seeing Checo, struggle from P11, 12, wasn't it? 12 in Canada to P6. I'm getting flashbacks of Alex, and I'm getting flashbacks of Pierre. Doing the same kind of thing, going out in Q2, struggling to make their way through the pack. When you don't have that optimum confidence and comfortableness in the car that's underneath you, that clearly they don't, then that's where it's going to bite you. Alex qualified 2 positions ahead of Checo in Canada and only finished 10 seconds behind. Now, Checo did pit for soft tyres to go for fastest lap, so actually it was more like 30 seconds behind. A Williams with no DRS that's spending most of its time trying to keep Esteban Ocon, George Russell first, then Esteban Ocon behind. GG Alex, a mad performance, and it prompted some very kind words, again completely unprompted. He just came out with it all by himself. From Christian Horner.
But wow, I mean, Alex as well, congrats to him. That was, I ended up watching as much of his race as our race was.
Are these words born of regret? Maybe in part, definitely because he had a good relationship with the team. If he'd have left on bad terms with Red Bull, why would Christian be so keen to be like, oh, Alex did a great job? At the end of the day, he tried his best in a stint at Red Bull, what started in his rookie season, remember? Everyone seems to forget that. And that was his strongest time in that Red Bull. The end of 2019, if you could just bottle that time, great, perfect. Unfortunately, he was kind of a victim of his own success because that showed potential, hence why they went with him instead of Pierre for 2020, and it all went wrong. It was too much to ask. That's how life goes sometimes. He's proven now since that he is actually a very competent F1 driver, and that stint wasn't reflective of his entire career. Just in the same way that Daniel Ricciardo's stint at McLaren is not reflective of his entire career. Clearly not. Vettel 2020, prime example, right? Fantastic at his highs. That was a real low. That doesn't mean he's a mug. That doesn't mean he's a terrible driver. It just means that certain drivers aren't as adaptable as others and able to get top performance out of every single car they drive. Now, Alex may technically be fully separated from Red Bull Racing. However, there are still connections, not so much to Red Bull Racing, but to Red Bull GmbH, big boss Red Bull. The Yuvidia family, who own 51% of Red Bull, also have connections to some of Alex Albon's sponsors, obviously Monsoon Valley, for example, who you'll see on Alex's helmet. Big sponsors of him was founded by Charlem Yuvadia, son of the Red Bull co-founder Chalio Yuvadia. Charlem is the heir to the Red Bull fortune. When Alex had his year off in DTM, that was obviously AlphaTauri, so Red Bull supported. And I'm somewhat surprised, I suppose, that those connections didn't help him, You know, again, when I look back to the end of 2021 and I look at Yuki Tsunoda Jr. really struggled first year. Honda are leaving. He's a Honda Junior, but they're leaving. Versus Albon has those connections to Red Bull, is more proven, did a really good job in Toro Rosso before he joined Red Bull in the first place. His 2019 season generally, he was Rookie of the Year. Ahead of Lando Norris, ahead of George Russell. He had a much better rookie season than Yuki Tsunoda did. It is a bit odd to me that they didn't keep him on, which, I mean, look, I'm glad, right? Because Alex is doing great right now, Yuki's doing great right now, and I love them both. This is not about what I want, it's just me trying to understand what decision making is going on at the team, because I don't know, I'm just a fan with a big mouth and a YouTube channel. So what do you think? Do you think Christian's expressing any regret in letting Alex go? Do you think there's any potential to bring him back? Do you think if Alex's performance continued to be really good, that Red Bull would try and twist his arm and pull him back into the fore? I hope not, because I think Alex is building a really fantastic career for himself outside of Red Bull. Hopefully it comes good with Williams. I'd love to see Williams back at the top again. But if not, then maybe he goes to another top team. I just don't want him to be Max's teammate ever again, because they are almost always going to struggle. I want to see Alex leading a team, and that's exactly what he's doing at Williams. Comment below your feelings, like for the algorithm, please. It really does help me out. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring what I do. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.